Hello, this is a Grotrian Steinweg Model 120 made in 1924. I've just come into stock. I'm just assessing it to see what sort of work we need to do on the piano. As you can see, it's an ebonized piano, black finish, so that's very popular with many people nowadays. We can repolish the piano. It's possible to repolish it in French polish, or it can be polyestered if necessary, or just tidied up as it is. Looking at the key tops, they are ivory key tops. You can see the line here that shows between the front and the back, but it's very heavily disguised line and extremely good condition. These ivories are. There's no chips whatsoever. Just need buffing really. They're slightly dull, and that will attract the dirt if they're not buffed. There's the original seller, and there's the logo for Grotrian Steinweg. Very tasteful, I believe. This music stand we often have to recover. You can see that has been recovered, I think, by somebody. So some work's been done on the piano, as we'll see in a minute, on the inside. I always like the way these Grotrian Steinwegs, you lift up the lid and you see that stay there. If you lift it right up and put it down, sometimes these are broken, but in this case it's in perfect condition, and it just holds it up. And a lot of people don't realise you can hold your piano up there, get a lot more volume, a bit like lifting a grand piano lid really. There's an extra music stand on the inside too, which is common on top quality German pianos. That's very useful too. There's the serial number of the piano, made in 1924, and there's the model, Grotrian Steinweg, beautifully designed. Our piano is very flat. You see halfway between A and A flat, so it's a quarter tone flat, which is very, very flat. Let's see if it's in tune with itself. I think probably it's not been tuned since it was last restored or last reconditioned practically, and I think that's probably, this date here we've got 1953 is probably about right. So let's see why we might say that's the right date. Now these tapes have been replaced, so obviously it's been lubricated here, I think, and then the old tape came off. They put new ones on, and those I never remember seeing those in the UK at all. So I think if you're restore a tuner, then perhaps you might have seen that style. So it's a style, I think, probably 1953, commensurate with that year. Let's have a listen to the overall tone. And you can hear straight away the beautiful richness of Grotrian Steinweg, which not just the bass, the whole tone of it. Now it's very flat, but I can hear the underlying sound. The breakpoint here is good, the soundboard is in good condition. That means the downbearing hasn't been lost, as we mentioned before in many other videos. This is important. The most important thing we look for first of all is whether around this area it has a nice singing tone. Of course, the singing tone's not as good as it will be when it's tuned and also voiced, of course. The hammers, let's have a look at the hammers and see what they're like. That represents, let's say it was reconditioned in 1953. That would represent maybe 5 years of 1 hour a day playing, and then nothing much after that. Looking at the hammers here, there's one here that is sort of doesn't look so worn on the end of it as the rest of them, and that's because it's a bit loose. And it's been wobbling around, so it is as worn, but it's just been wobbling around, and so it hasn't got the 3 indentations that the others have got, and that's because it's loose. I checked the looseness on that. It's usually tightening up a back plate at the back, but in this case it seems to not be that. Now before we look at the action, the tuning pins, they are original tuning pins. I'm pretty certain about that, because they're small pins. My medium style lever wobbles around, as we've said many times before, assessing other pianos. They are just about tight enough. There's some difficult decisions to make on this piano. I want to try and keep the original strings, ideally, because restringing in Grotrian, the strings are so well made, the whole piano is so well designed, that you lose some of that fruity tone. Now down there, I think the strings might need turning. If you listen to them, that one's weak sounding. Now, if you turn the string about half or one turn in the direction of the coil, then that stiffens it up, and suddenly you get more like that, which is a much fruitier, rich sound. Listen to that compared to the D. And just turning the string will bring it to that. So replacing these strings, obviously new strings you might think will add to the tone, but it's not like a guitar where you would want to change the bass strings. On a piano, you lose some of the original tone by changing them. If you're in the trade, you might like to comment, because it's a hard decision to make. But if you've got a very good string maker, and you have a really top string maker, then hopefully you can maintain most of that. You can otherwise just replace the tuning pins if you think they're a bit loose. It's a big decision to make. What we'll do, I think, is pitch raise this piano, and then when we do that, we can sort of be thinking about all the tuning pins. They're not knocked in at all. When tuning pins are loose, you often find that they've been knocked in. But these are the distance from the wood that you'd expect them to be for the coil to be. But if they've been knocked in, then you immediately think that they are loose. But I think all the way along they haven't been knocked in at all. So that's encouraging. But I think if we pitch raise the piano, and because no strings are broken so far, then we can pitch raise, if we said before that if we lubricate here, lubricate the pressure points, take it down before we take it up, then there's absolutely no reason why we should break any. But if we do find they're breaking, obviously then restringing is something we're very, very likely to do. But we cut ours just re-pin if we feel they're a bit loose. We want the pianos to be trouble-free and as good as any other piano for at least 30 years, so we're not going to skimp on what we need to do. But obviously everything puts the price up. So, and as I say, we don't want to lose the original quality of these wonderful strings. Soundboards of Grotrian Steinweg are wonderful. Look at the way that's shaped as well, rounded rather than straight down to the side. It's just a beautiful soundboard, and obviously responsible for the tone largely, as well as the good strings. But there's the Model 120. I don't know what the W522 means, so if anybody is in the trade and knows about that, then it would be really nice to know. But looking at this, the soundboard is in perfect condition. Everything about Grotrian uprights is quality. I haven't mentioned this in any other videos, so just to say, I really love, you can tell quality when you just feel these brass screws, and they're just beautiful, but brass nuts, sorry, and it's weighty. It's much, compared to a modern piano, nothing like that. There's no holes barred in trying to make this piano as good as possible. Now, looking at the back of the action, I mentioned earlier about the this one here. It was very wobbly. You can see it's loose because the ones next to it are marked, and this one's been wobbling around. So there's no marks showing because it's hadn't hit the strings cleanly. So normally you just have to tighten the butt plate. So there's the butt plate screw, and you just tighten that screw, and the piano's not wobbly, and the hammer's not wobbly anymore. Or it could be the screw that holds this hinge on if the piano's dried out a lot. But it's neither of those things. So that means it's going to be the felt on here that needs replacing, or that rather the hinge pin need a bigger one in, or otherwise replace the felt on the side. That's got to be done, and we'll have to check them all. I can see the numbers put on the back here, which indicates that they've been taken off, and we said the piano had been worked on. So there's some of the damper springs. I'm pushing these back, and the springs on the side, some of them are weaker than others. Here, there's a damper spring, and some of them are weak, so they will need replacing. We could replace the whole lot. If you do ever replace damper springs, they mustn't be too tight, especially the ones at the top here. They're smaller, they're thinner springs, and these are slightly thicker here, and then the thickest springs are reserved for starting from about here. You want thicker springs to maximum power, but you don't want them too tight. So, well, the damper's got to come off reasonably late, otherwise the spring just affects the touch so much. But around here they do need to be strong. So these are reasonably good. So it's a decision to make whether you replace there's another weak one there, the weak ones, or just replace the whole lot. I think we're probably leaning towards replacing the whole lot here. As I say, it's really a difficult decision to make, because sometimes these pianos are so well made, the replacement parts aren't necessarily going to improve it. And obviously everything you do costs money. Notice here they don't have capstans here, they have screws underneath here. That's quite a lot of makes of piano have that, so it's perfectly good idea, but perhaps capstans are a little bit better to adjust. And these keys are not tight, not too tight. We often have to lubricate the center here, as we've mentioned before, with dry lubricant we use, but don't have to do that on this one. Let's take some keys out and have a look underneath. Looking underneath the keys, there's not a huge amount. There will be a huge carpet here of dust if that was from 1924, but from 1953 about, right, I think some of these felts have been replaced and not others, as you can see by the different colour. The centre rail is perfect as well, and the keys are all the same height, so, well, there was one that wasn't, so we'll have to look at that. And the cricket bats here, which we call cricket bat shaped, you see, they can be turned and if they need to be adjusted, but they haven't really been adjusted, and there's not a huge amount of wear. Well, that's testimony to the quality of the piano manufacture. So I'm just going backwards a bit because I meant to show the contrast between this and one that we fully restored. The rest plank here is fine, doesn't need replacing, but sometimes they do need replacing. Now here's the Bechstein Model 5 that I've done a recent video of, where behind here the rest plank, this is a closed plank so you can't see the wood there, but behind there we've replaced the wood because very commonly on this model of piano, this is I say Bechstein Model 5, Model 4 as well, rest planks dry out and they won't cope with central heating, so they need replacing. So as you can see, the whole lot's been redone, and the hammers have been redone on this one as well. Now, I've never really known a Grotrian to have a problem with rest plank, but we could obviously replace if it was necessary. So they're well made and don't seem to need, they cope with central heating well, but you do need to change the tuning pins sometimes if they're loose. And obviously you have to look after all pianos and make sure the piano doesn't dry out. The hammers here, there's plenty of felt on them, so there's no need to replace those either. Now, just to finish off with the key weighting, very, very important. This is a 44 grams. So it's a bit on the light side for study, but 44 grams might be suitable if you're an occasional player. They're all pretty much weighted off at 44 grams. There's probably one or two that vary slightly, so that's where we'd need to put weights in the back of the keys. As you may have seen earlier, the back of the keys have got weights in them. Let's take this one out. You can see that we'd have to just add a bit more weight to the back of the key. There's a weight here at near the back and then the middle there. Grotrian has also been very fastidious in weighing the keys, and we can just even them up with weights. We could change the hammers, which would make the whole thing heavier. We could put extra weights in the back to weigh the keys. But if you're a serious musician or want to practice the piano and take exams, then it's a good idea to have them all exactly the same weight. So maybe increase this from 44 to 48 or 50 if you, or 50 to 52 if you really want to work your fingers. But if you're an occasional player, you might find 44 is very suitable for you. You might not want to change that if you don't play a huge amount. Older pianos, the older the piano gets, the lighter it was. So going right back to the 19th century, touch was lighter anyway. There's a bit of key slack here that needs taking up as well, so just a little bit of wear, but not a huge amount. So but that does make a lot of difference to the touch. In other words, this bottom part there responds before the hammer, so the whippen, as we call it, responds before the hammer does. So that we need to turn that screw underneath to take that up. So that's an assessment of a Grotrian Steinweg 120 upright piano made in 1924. It's in our storage area and I'm on my own, so sorry about the angle of the video here, but I won't go on very long playing it because it's a quarter of a tone flat and quite out of tune, but the underlying tone is as you'd expect it to be for this, one of the very best models of upright piano. We're trying to source them all the time because they're such rich sounding instruments. We're trying to find the right word to use there, but how do you put sound into words? But certainly it's the sort of piano I could play all day long because of the underlying tone. But it's hard to distinguish here. I'm sorry, on the video probably doesn't come out very well. So I hope that's been useful. And again, I'm sorry it's perhaps been a bit on the long side, but thank you very much for listening.